If your disc brakes have gradually become ineffective or you just want to increase their performance further still, this is the video for you because I'm going to explain how to upgrade your disc brakes. First things first, some assumptions here because I'm going to assume that your brakes are serviced and working correctly. So that means they've been bled within the last year. The brakes are not rubbing, the brake pads are not worn out, nor are the rotors too. So if any of that's not the case for you, well, go away, fix that first, and then if you're still wanting more performance from your brakes, come back here and then we'll talk further. Now, there's a number of different ways to go around upgrading your brakes, but the most important things to remember are that it's the front brake that is doing the majority of the work, and also that your braking technique is important too. So it's important that you don't drag the brakes continually on long descents because that's going to cause excess heat to build up in the braking system, and that could just be the root cause of much of your problems. Anyway, before you even go about buying some new parts, the most important thing and first thing to do here is to make sure everything is thoroughly clean. To do that, you're going to need a clean cloth and some disc brake cleaner. Spray it all over the brake rotor and the brake pads. Give everything a wipe over, and then in some cases, this is enough to make a noticeable difference, but don't expect any miracles here. Now, when it comes to upgrading your brakes, one of the first things you need to look at are the brake pads, which sit in the caliper here. Now, there are loads of different brands out there that make brake pads to suit all different group sets and bikes, but broadly speaking, the brake pad friction material here fits into three different categories. You've got resin, which is sometimes called organic. You then have sintered, which is sometimes called metallic. And then you have semi-metallic. Now, the three different categories of compound offer different braking characteristics. Resin or organic will have the greatest initial bite and brake feel when you first pull the brake lever. They're often particularly quiet. They do wear down quite quickly, and they're not great at dealing with a large amount of heat buildup. Then at the other end of the scale, you've got metallic or sintered. These pretty much have the complete flip side of the categories of organic or resin. So that means they've got a good ability to deal with a heat buildup. They're fairly noisy when you apply the brake. They last a long time. And third option, which is semi-metallic, well, it kind of sits as a halfway house, offering a little bit of the best of both worlds. When it comes to actually choosing the brake pad compound, it's a case of looking at the needs that you want from your cycling and then choosing a compound that matches those needs as best as you can. And then seeing as most people are here because they want to upgrade their brakes, most likely to increase that initial brake feel, it would seem like resin or organic could offer the upgrade that you need for your bike. And it's important as well that I want to note, don't be afraid to deviate away from the big group set manufacturers' brake pads because there's lots of reputable brands out there making aftermarket brake pads which offer really good performance. There's brands like Trick Stuff, AMP and Swiss Stop which all make brake pads compatible with all of the different group sets. Now, in my experience and from some of the test data that I have seen, having a cooling fin onto the brake pad compared to one without isn't really a big deal. Now, while some manufacturers do have it, and it does inevitably provide a little bit of extra heat dissipation, it isn't a feature I would search out when you're looking to upgrade your brakes. The next thing we need to consider is rotor size. Now, bigger is better here when it comes to heat dissipation and also leverage. A larger brake rotor will mean you need to apply less force up at the brake lever for the same braking force down at the wheel and tyre. There's also other aspects you should consider as well, because broadly speaking, 160mm rotor is the standard on the front for road bikes, and 140 is kind of the standard for the back. Now, if by some chance your bike is set up with 140mm rotor on the front, an easy upgrade is simply to replace it for a 160mm rotor. Now, if you do have this set up on your bike, or you want to upgrade the rotor at the back from a 140 to a 160, it's just a case of fitting a different adapter. So at the back, you add the adapter spacer in and add some bolts, and then on the front, the little carrier which sits here, you just unbolt it, flip it around, and that'll set your bike up for a 160mm rotor. Having said 140 and 160 is broadly speaking the standard for road bikes, on a gravel bike it would be 160 rear and 180 front. You could also fit a 180mm rotor to the front of some road bikes by using a special adapter. I've used one of these in the past, and it's made by a company called Peak Torque, who make a number of small specialist parts. But if you are going to go down this route, it's super important to make sure that you check with, say, the manufacturer of your frame or fork that it's capable to deal with those extra loads, because the bigger the brake rotor, the larger the force that's exerted onto the fork. Rotor size isn't the only thing you need to look at. You also need to look at the design too. Now, low-cost rotors will typically be just a solid steel construction and won't have any different materials used. Whereas if you look to a more premium brand, they're going to have features like cooling fins and an aluminium core in the center. This is all to help aid with heat dissipation, so that's well worth considering too. I would also suggest, if you were going down the route of trying to save weight on your bike, to perhaps maybe avoid some of the super lightweight rotor designs which have got minimal material used and lots of large cutouts. Whilst this is a great way of saving a bit of weight from your bike, it's not great for heat dissipation. And if you're trying to increase the performance of your brakes, heat dissipation is of a greater priority than reducing the weight. And that is pretty much it, to be honest. Those are what I feel to be considered the most important parts when it comes to upgrading your brakes. What is particularly important though is to make sure that ahead of buying new components, you do make sure your brakes are cleaned and serviced correctly, and then you can start to head out and look at different ways to upgrade your brakes. Right, please do let me know in the comments section down below what brake pads you tend to use, and if you've looked at using any upgraded parts on your bike. And also, if you want to help support what we do, subscribe to GCN Tech.